Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws with another exclusive interview. Today's special guest is someone who worked on Jaws the movie, and this year it's 50 years since the movie was made. Today's guest is Marty Milner. He worked on set construction, building the Orca, and repairing Bruce the shark. And today, Marty's going to tell us some fantastic stories about the making of the movie and his experience on this legendary cinematic event. Please welcome Marty Milner to the Daily Jaws. Marty, welcome.
Hi, Ross. Thanks very much. I really enjoy your Daily Jaws broadcasts and all the little bits and pieces you've strung together over the years. It's quite an effort on your part. So, in a way, I'm really glad to finally get on here. I feel like we've known each other for years.
Thank you, Marty. That's really kind of you to say. Jaws is, one of the well, for me, it's the most, the greatest movie ever made, and it's the Daily Jaws has become a real sort of passion project. And one of the great things about it is I'm able to connect with people like yourself. And we were saying just before we press record that you and I have been sort of friends on Facebook. We've messaged for a long time, and now we've finally got the chance to actually talk. So it's wonderful to finally have you on the show. Um, Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about the picture behind you.
Well, a couple of years ago, I took up watercolor, so I've been sketching different scenes uh, from actually not from the movie. They're scenes of me working on the movie. So, and this one behind me is a an homage to the Jaws poster because the Jaws poster. I have tremendous respect for the original painter and for the movie image, and it's a very well-known image, but it's not our shark. That's a Mako.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
what I did is I did a poster. I'll send you a link of it so you can put it up somewhere if you want to. But I basically did uh, a maquette of a poster, and the title of it is L, the letter L, which is Roman numeral 50, and it's
Ah,
in the Jaws script. So and it's just a little side thing that I'm doing. I'm actually, just so you know, um, I actually have a series of postcards that I'm eventually going to release that people can get a hold of because they're signed and each one has a title and it's just a postcard and it's not anything too fancy, but it's just something that kids could get. They're affordable, hugely affordable. Jim Beller, a famous collector,
mm,
helped me with it, figuring out how to do this because I wanted to have something for the 50th anniversary that kids could collect, that they could hold on to, that were not way over their head, that were actually authentic kind of souvenirs. And also for Jaws freaks who come to the island, they can mail these postcards to other collector friends of theirs, stamp postmarked on the island. So that's kind of a long-term project that I have. So it's just one of the things that I'm doing.
oh,
So there you go.
that sounds fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, best of luck with that project, and a shout out to Jim Bella. Hi, Jim. I hope you're watching. We're going to get you on the show soon, I promise. Um, so, Marty, as we sort of said, you've actually worked on the movie. So the first question is the obvious one, and you've already alluded to it as well. Can you believe it's 50 years since you were on Martha's Vineyard working on this incredible film?
I find that extraordinary. I did not expect to be living, as long as I have lived, and I've led a good life, and I've done a lot of things. I'm highly regarded in a number of different areas, mostly by individual people, because I can think very clearly, and I'm good with organizing small details and the big picture. In a way, what I learned on Jaws was the foundation for who it was that I became because I've always been a very confident person in very difficult circumstances. So early on, I learned to think on my feet, and Jaws was a good foundational experience for, you know, getting into life and getting through my own parts of life, life can be very difficult. And other people's lives can be difficult, and sometimes they don't know to, who to go to in order to get, through the situation that they're in.
Mm,
That goes directly to what happened on Jaws. See, I was hired before they started. I was hired in a bar by Ward Welton and Jim Woods, and my friend Bobby Imeny and I were out at a bar, and uh, they came up to me, and several people had pointed me out to them, and they said, "We're looking for a local carpenter who knows people and can help us organize. We're making a movie, and it's going to be a short movie, probably be 30, 60 days of shooting. So we need a commitment." And basically, we talked for quite a bit of time about tools, about prefabrication. I can I have a very good sense of BS, and I could tell that they were serious tradespeople
mm,
because they asked the right questions, and when I gave them the right answers and they followed up, they knew that I was the right person. I also had a truck full of tools right out in the parking lot that I told them, "Hey, I can show you my tools." And we talked about how different things are done. So they decided they would hire me as the foreman of set construction for local hires. Um, I had no idea what that was, and guess what? Neither did they. But they had a guy, and I know a guy, and the before the filming, Ross, it's the 50th anniversary, May 2nd, I think it is.
mhm,
Before that, we had to have, um, we were beginning to work on the reconverting of the first boat into what Joe Alves wanted it to be. We had to complete the beach scene working at a boatyard in Norton and Esterbrook's in Eggertown. We had to complete the beach scene and have it be able to be prefabbed. So we had all that going on prior to the shooting. So most of my job is never close to the camera. It is never close to the top people at um, the higher end of the organizational chart. My immediate supervisor was Ward Welton, who was an incredibly knowledgeable construction person. And we got together famously early on, and we became close friends. And a lot of the things that we had to build, didn't know which way to go. And sometimes I made suggestions on how we could do things. For instance, the bandstand gazebo in the beach scene, there are 8 sections in the roof. And each of those sections were made independently and could be carried by about 6 people. So we built those 8 sections. We assembled it once or twice in the boatyard and made sure we knew how to do it and put it to one side, created the 8 sections of, actually, there were 6 sections of slat rails in that bandstand, and 2 sections were open. And then we had the individual posts that held the roof up. And then we had underneath that, we had these sections of boardwalk that were just 2x6s nailed down, but then we scrambled them by aging them with a gray paint. So in each case, uh, the arcade, the hot dog stand, I think there were 8 cabanas, the bandstand, the lifeguard stations. Each of them had to be designed, had to be portable, had to be painted new correctly so they were bright, and then aged. So the whole time we were working off of what comprised the beach scene, um, we had to basically wing it, and it had to be a reproducible piece of work that if we had to, we could take it down and put it back up again numerous times, depending on the local politics on
mm,
actually camping out on a public beach. And you have no idea how confusing that was for everybody at the top end to negotiate with the people who ran things on Martha's Vineyard. You're
mm,
talking about a major nightmare because it was going into the summer season, and there were traffic jams galore, and people were not happy with the filming of that movie.
There was a just on that, there was a really famous story. I think it was about Quint's shack, because that was a vacant lot from what I understood, and Joe Ells designed the shack and then
Yeah.
had it built. And part of the agreement was after filming, everything had to be put back just as it was, including the trash. That's how specific and sort of it's
Yes.
alluding to what you're talking about, the
Yes.
political climate. You know,
Well,
they were that intent.
well, let me fill that in for you. It's like because the making of the movie is not the same sequence as the shooting of the movie. Um, we built the beach scene because we didn't have sharks that worked. So and we had the two boats that had to be constructed simultaneously. Right after the beach scene was completed, we started fabricating the second Orca that had no bottom. So we converted the first boat into what Joe Alves wanted, and then we painted the hull with motor oil and covered it with fiberglass cloth and fiberglass resin, peeled that off, and then we finished the first boat and repainted the hull because we had damaged sections of the hull with the fiberglass removal. We had to like get like there's an epoxy mix that you can put into a marine environment that will seal and fill areas that you tore out when it got removed with the fiberglass. And then we
Mm,
built the exact duplicate in the boathouse, and I would go back and forth between the two to make sure that it was absolutely identical. And in the
mm,
movie, you can't really tell. I can tell, but you can't tell when it's Orca 1 or Orca 2. And we also, at some point along in there, my friend Bobby Imony, who was with us from the very beginning, we shifted him and about a third of the crew up to framing the house in Menemsha, which was Quint's shack. So because that lot is a very small lot and there was no workplace, so we had to prefab a lot of the rafter cuts and the wall cuts and all that stuff. Bobby would give me a list and we'd fabricate it and send it up. There's a really nice gentleman named Nat Bookman who was uh, Teamster from New Bedford, and he got all the garbage work because the Teamsters from Boston sat around and played pinochle all day long at the movie set, and they rarely drove anybody, and it was just a total feather bedding on their part
mm,
to be available in case they were needed. But Nat basically had to haul the pieces of Quint's house up there and a bunch of other stuff. And in addition, we simultaneously were working on the billboard in Gay Head, which is now called Aquina. So uh, at um, every time there was a break because of a confusion in terms of the storyboard, in terms of what was going to be shot, that was based on weather or materials or a script problem, we had to shift so that we could continue working on something that was going to be coming up. So all of and this stuff had to be hauled around um, while they were shooting. Like the next scene had to be set. So we were in advance of the shooting, probably a day or two or three, but we had to be careful with permits and where we built things and how we did things. It's like the billboard up in Gay Head that went up and came back down again really quick. But it took a long time to build it. It was built in two sections. There were four uh, post holes dug by, I think, the telephone company, and then we mounted two by boards across the posts to make sure they were structurally able to carry the load. And we built a catwalk, and then we delivered the billboard, lifted the billboard up, put it up on the post, leveled it, and made sure it was square. And then I had to drive a bunch of wedges behind it because if you look in the movie, there's a seam right down the middle. Uh, and the seam was highly visible. And it
mm,
took me hours to get that seam to mostly disappear. And then Ward had to put a decal on the billboard, and then he covered it with like a white carpenter's glue to try to seal it from the weather in case we got stuck by New England weather. And it was still like a few hours before they were shooting, it was still not dry, and there was like a white kind of milky glaze over it. And Ward said, "Don't worry, it'll be clear by the time you're ready to shoot." And that's exactly what happened. So a lot of uh, there was a lot of threatening to fire people and to get rid of different people
Oh,
for
really?
different reasons, including Spielberg. It was
Yeah,
like
I think
people were
Spielberg was threatened to
anxious.
get fired every day.
Well, everybody was.
Yeah.
I was under a lot of pressure, and a lot of the people that we hired came and went because they weren't needed all the time.
Mhm.
So I was working. I worked 32 days without a day off, and I was working 12 to 14 hours a day. I was basically exhausted by the 32nd day. I looked like a wreck, and Ward basically said, you're not going to be saved for yourself or anybody else. I need you to go home for 3 days and just get yourself back together again because we've really pushed hard and we're at a stopping spot where I can let this thing breathe for a bit. So just go home and take 3 days off because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And I did that probably between the beach scene and Quint's house and the arrival of the sharks. Then we had to strike. It's called a dead strike. It's like when you strike a set, it's either a dead strike or it's not a dead strike. If it's a dead strike, you can just trash everything. If it's just a strike, you need to take everything down carefully because you may have to put it back up again. So we got the dead strike order on the beach scene and we demolished it and got it to the dump. I took a bunch of the slats from the gazebo and used them in a pump house up in my yard just because I could.
Yeah. Why not?
The rest of it was basically junk. I mean,
Mm.
like the gazebos were made out of basically masonite, and we ripped a 2x3 in half and framed it up 16 inches on center, four walls and a roof. The roof was integral. It could easily be carried by four people because of very light masonite. I think it was 1/8 inch masonite. And if you flip masonite backwards, on the back side is like a corrugated print that looks just like canvas. So we put the masonite on the gazebo, on the cabanas backwards so that it would look like canvas. Then we painted them white and orange. And then we scrumbled it so that they all looked aged the same. And I was never there when they did it, but I went over each set live. I went over each boat with Ward. I went over the beach scene with Ward, where they were placed, that every building was level and square and plumb, and it looked like it had been there for like 50 years.
Mhm.
And it had been there for 3 days. And people
It's
always say, well, I've been to Martha's Vineyard, but the whole beach scene was gone. Well, guess what? It never was there. It was like that's just the way it is. It's like that was not supposed to be up for very, very long because
Mhm.
that's a state beach and
Yeah.
people go to Martha's Vineyard to that's one of the few places you can easily get to that's accessible, that's not like a private beach or has some kind of
Mm.
like bad parking. So the state beach in Oak Bluffs that's a major section of beach, and for that to be basically occupied for May into June, that interferes with a lot of people's livelihoods in terms of like whether their customers are happy.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's just like the same
that's
as the shark in Jaws, isn't it? Interfering with the summer trade, I guess, isn't it? It's art imitating life, I guess.
there are parallels in the movie to the making of the movie,
Mm.
as there are in the uh, like for instance, the making of the book Memories of Martha's Vineyard. They call it the Jaws Bible,
Mm.
um, and that's like the comprehensive book. That was a nightmare for Matt Taylor and Jim Beller to put together. I know a lot of the what I call the Jaws universe people, And it's
Mm,
like everybody's in their own little spaceship, buzzing around through the universe of Jaws, doing their little thing. And I love that. That's what you do with your thing. And I have never criticized anybody for doing anything that they're doing because that movie means a lot to them. It means a lot to fans, enough
mm,
so that some of them are inspired to do things.
mm,
And that's good because it adds to the energy. It adds to the appreciation of the movie, and it allows people to somewhat participate on the periphery,
mm.
um, of it, so that they can feel that they're a part of what has inspired them, what scared the living daylights out of them.
I think it's a really good point that you make there. I mean, just a couple of things I want to pick up on what you've been talking about. Jaws is often lauded as a real great example of filmmaking craft, whether it's the script, the acting, the editing, the sound, or whatever. But what you've just described there, when it comes to like just the beach scene and the amount of and also the billboards, the amount of attention to detail, just to physically make those things come alive and look weathered, and like you said, letting that line sort of disappear from the billboard, so it doesn't look like it's in two pieces or anything like that. We haven't even got to Bruce the Shark or the Orca yet. That's the level of
Yeah,
craftsmanship and detail and skill that goes into a very practically based movie, because obviously there wasn't CGI or anything like that at that in that time. So for me, it's just
yes,
testament to the amount of work. And then, like you say, you put that huge amount of time constraint and pressure on top of it, plus all the political stuff going on around on Martha's Vineyard. It's like, for me, I always sort of say it's a miracle that this movie actually saw the light of day, and the fact that we're still talking about it 50 years later is just a testament to everybody's contribution. I remember when I was speaking to Carl Gottlieb, the screenwriter, the co-screenwriter of Jaws, and he said that Jaws, for him, his main sort of takeaway was that no matter what the odds are, no matter what you're put up against, if you get the right people in the right frame of mind doing the right thing, you can make miracles happen, and it's absolutely true. And what you've just described there, I think, sort of backs that up. And the other thing about the Jaws community that you picked up on beautifully there as well, particularly with the sort of the advent of social media. I mean, social media is a tool. You can do great things with it. You can do very bad things with it. On the whole, the Jaws community is one of the most positive and passionate communities, because I love movies. Jaws was the kind of movie that got me into movies. I mean, I love books and everything else, but movies is my thing. And generally, yeah, when you look at kind of what is happening in the Jaws community, particularly with the Jaws 50th anniversary on the horizon, it's a really exciting time. I mean, we're getting some really interesting, I can't tell you too much, but we're getting some really interesting messages from people out there going, we're going to do this, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. And what we've found as being the Daily Jaws is we seem to be the platform where people kind of want to land their projects and get it out there in front of the world. So we're happy to be that, if that's what people kind of want. And
yeah.
we've got a couple of things in the pipeline that we're working on for ourselves. But if there are sort of creators listening, or anybody that kind of just wants to get a Jaws related project out there and it's coming from a place of genuine passion, then drop us an email, partners@thedailyjaws.com. We'll take a look at it, and if we think it's a good fit for our audience, we'll absolutely get your voice and your vision out there, because that's kind of what the Daily Jaws has sort of really
I can tell you,
become over the
Ross.
years.
I can tell you, Ross. There are a bunch of people who have done miniatures and scale reproductions of, and they ask me because I built the Orca, and they're so proud of what they've done, and they've done a credible job of building
Mm.
these miniature orcas, and they've even done Quint Shack, and it's like these miniatures. That's a lot of work. Those people are really dedicated uh, uh, reproductionists, and I really I've never seen anybody do anything even close to a half-hearted job. Even Brandon in England, who's like probably one of your neighbors, give or take a couple of 100 miles, the little
Mm.
kid, he's built orcas out of cardboard. He and Phil, they built
Yeah,
orcas out of cardboard, and they've done little uh, like the Jaws we make with all the clips and stuff. There's been a lot
yeah.
of really good efforts that are fun for people to see and participate in. And I hope that the 50th anniversary is just slammed with those kinds of things. because it is a huge celebration. I know we're in at least the second generation of fans,
Mm,
and possibly well on our way towards possibly the third generation. So it's like just to like get a little bit back on track, the with the construction part of it, um, the we went from the beach scene, and then there was an overlap with the Orcas, Orca 1 and Orca 2. Then there was the Quint's house, and I was up there a number of times doing different things that had to be done because it didn't pass muster. So certain things had to be done. It was like the yellow stain decal that we put on the round window in Quint's house. There was a killer whale that was in the basement that was next to a chum making machine that had to get up there one day. There were a lot
mm,
of things like that going on. And then after the beach scene was struck and after Quint's was shot, and the Quint's shack didn't have a lot in the movie. Then it was a question of working on the sharks. And then we also had to make the breakaway cabin wall and the breakaway cabin stern,
mm,
this breakaway stern for the Orca II, because we had to have multiple copies of that made and they were identical copies. So, and then there were different repairs that had to be made because everything was falling apart. The, that boat was not a seaworthy craft in the first place, and Orca 2 was definitely not even a boat. It was like uh, uh, a hard copy reproduction of uh, it could sink and it could bark it back up. It could angle one way, angle another way.
mm.
The bow could go down. The bow could go. The stern could go down. It could go at different angles and things. So, but that stuff was breaking constantly and falling apart. So, different things had to be repaired, and the shark had all kinds of problems, and it
Yeah.
would be tearing itself to pieces. And while they were trying to figure out how to operate the pneumatics and the hydraulics that drove the thing, at one point they had to get a more powerful ram because the ram that they had, that's like a pressurized arm that articulates and moves things. So they had a good working drawing and they had a nice dry model uh, of the four sharks. There was a front view, a left view, a right view, and a sea sled view. And then there was a half head that they blew up at the end of the movie.
Mm,
Every one of those was a dry land piece of perfection until we put it in the ocean. And then it started sagging, and then the skin started ripping, and the hydraulics tore the side of the mouth right there and right over here. Because when the mouth goes too big, the skin rips. And they didn't have the hydraulic rams. They didn't have stops on the hydraulic rams. And also there was a little bit of chatter with the smoothness of it because of the nature of the hydraulic setup that they had. And that was Bob Matty, Roy Arbogast, myself, Ford Welton, a number of other people. And they were also making repairs out at sea, but they would bring the sharks back after they were done with the left side or the right side or the front view or whatever they were doing, and they'd give it to me and they'd say, we need this thing by tomorrow. And that meant I had to work all night on it. So I work
wow.
all day, eat dinner. Sometimes I got to eat at the catered food truck because they always made extra food, and I was basically starving all the time. I was burning a lot of calories. I was
Man.
kind of fat in the first place, and Ward was a skeleton, and we would just go to that place and just chow down on all the extra food. Then I'd get to the end of the day, eat dinner, go home for a couple of hours, then come back and work all night on the shark. And I wouldn't be done till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And because you have to wait for the epoxy to dry as you're doing layers of repairs. So I would also look for something else that was about to let go, or something that needed to be reinforced, or where there was a skin fold or some kind of problem that had to be fixed that I knew was going to go wrong, because I got to know the inside of that shark pretty good.
Mm.
There aren't that many people that have actually been inside of the shark. You know, even kiddingly, it's a messy, disgusting place to be.
Yeah.
But I got to know the inside of that shark pretty well. And I also swapped out the teeth. There's hard teeth and soft teeth. And sometimes the teeth just break. So
Mm.
those teeth have to be cut out of the gums and then they have to be reset. And I would also make a bunch of teeth. I actually have, you can't see it that well, or you definitely couldn't see it, but on this thumb here, I've got a scar for where I slipped and tore my thumb open on one of the shark's teeth. One day I was just, moving too quickly and I slipped, and the sharks, and I put like 3 Band-Aids on it and just got back to work. And, but that's the whole thing of like, there's this beautiful design of a shark. There's this beautiful storyboard of a story. There's a beautiful dryland shark, and then there's a nightmare of what happens after you try to use it to make that story.
Yeah.
And it's like they'd never built one before, so nobody knew how to repair it. Nobody knew how it was going to work in the ocean.
Mm.
Nobody knew, the hydraulics or the pneumatics or the articulation of the steel frame. They had made smaller things, and Bob Matty had made a bunch of things, and Ward had worked on a bunch of special effects. So they knew generally how to do things, but they knew how to repair it after they saw what it broke, but they could not predict what was going to break next.
Mm.
And that level of uncertainty uh, led to a lot of creativity and a lot of anticipation and a whole lot of stress, because
Mm.
people who have money, big money, and the budget went from 3 million to 6 million to 9 million, and finally in post production to 11 million. When you have that kind of money involved, they don't want to
Mm.
hear a song and a dance about uncertainty or about what may
Yeah.
or may not happen. They want an answer, or somebody's going to get fired.
Yeah.
And trying to wrestle your way through um, all of that, and just do your job and also do things that actually work, and to have your work come back ripped up time after time after time in the same way while
Mm.
they're still figuring it out. It's just like you just do what you have to do, and
Yeah.
you make it as strong as you possibly can, because they're going to uh, uh, break it unless they decide to fix their end of it. So
Mm.
it's like, and then when you're all done, you've got to take all this stuff and make sure that everything, you got to rake the beach, get the nails, uh, drag a magnet over the beach, make sure that the beach is not going to have anything on it that would injure anybody afterwards. So when you're done, you move on. It's like you mentioned with Quint's house. You tear the thing down, you get it to the dump, you clean everything out, you restore it to exactly the way it looked beforehand.
Mm.
And that's basically you know, that's the whole picture. The people at the top don't know what's happening at the bottom, and they really
Mm.
don't care.
Yeah.
They need deliverables when they're on the shooting schedule, and they don't need excuses, and they don't need people who don't know how to figure things out, because that's not what the job is. The job is to have a deliverable. When they say they're going to shoot a certain scene, the scene has to be done.
Mm.
It's like there's no room for excuses. And everybody in the organizational chart is like pushing all this pressure down, and you have to like you gotta you gotta deliver.
It's incredible to hear you talk about it in this way because not to say that Jaws has ever had the impression of it being an easy production, in sort of folklore, it is one of the hardest. But like you say, it's we only really ever kind of hear about the boat sinking or the pressure that Spielberg was under and all of those things. And as you say, that pressure trickles down to everybody in the organizational chart. And it's ultimately the boots on the ground that kind of keep the movie moving forward. And it feels like a playground of innovation in a pressure cooker. that's the way that I would
Yes.
kind of imagine it.
Yeah,
And
that's a great description.
mm,
And basically, you have to remember that back in the day, I mean, people were drinking beer all day long. Everybody was drinking beer. Like everybody was drinking coffee, everybody was eating food. It was like there's no such thing as the workday. It's a question
mm,
of we have a deadline and this has to happen. How are we going to make this happen? Let's try this. Well, that didn't work. Let's get another
mm,
solution. Why didn't it work? And this is true also with everything you do, whatever you do in your day job, what everybody who's watching this does in their day jobs. It's like the people who are labor in the world who make things happen
mm,
and have to step in and like make a decision because they know that what everybody else thinks is going to work is going to fail. And they have to do something to prevent that from happening. It
yeah,
comes down to the guy on the line, the guy who's doing the actual work, who knows. They can't just say, well, screw it, let this guy lose his job. It's like, because you might lose your job too. You've got to do the right thing and report what you need to report.
mm,
That's why making the movie with Ward and the cluster of people that we had that were at different points in the movie, different clusters of people were involved, but
mm,
I was involved throughout the entire course. I was the first person they hired and the last person they let go on the island.
mm,
Um, my good friend Kevin Pike, who we hired as kind of a gopher kind of painter at one point, and he ended up involved in different sections, and he went out to Hollywood eventually and worked with the head through the hole scene. That was like that startling moment where Craig Kingsbury's
yes,
face pops out of the hole
that's
at
correct.
Dreyfus, and that's the whole. None of that stuff is in sequence. That wasn't even shot until Verna Fields figured out she needed something
Mm,
post production. So they shot that in a swimming pool out there. And you have to
yeah,
remember, most people don't remember when they were 26 years old, but I was 26 years old at the time. Steven Spielberg was also 26 years old. And honestly, a 26-year-old person doesn't really know a whole lot, and they have more creativity than they have experience. And that
mm,
was true with Spielberg and his storytelling, and that was true with me and my construction. It was a question of taking what you have and moving it up to a higher level that you were unfamiliar with and uncertain of,
mm,
and doing the best you could to make something succeed and not ever getting any credit or any real thanks for it. I mean, it was technically it was just a job, just getting the job done. But it's
yeah,
like uh, I think Spielberg really rose to the occasion of storytelling, but practically he learned
mm,
the politics of movie making,
yeah,
and that movie freaked him out. And he was so young and so vulnerable,
mm,
and the people who were working against him on that movie and the people who weren't putting the effort in and the people who were driving up costs, he realized at that point his career almost ended. And after that, everything he did was a letter perfect piece of machinery. I mean, I'm sure he had a lot of problems and stuff, but in terms of like making things happen correctly and not getting snowballed by the malfeasant people of the world
mm,
who inhabit a great many workforces. It's like I've hired at different points for different companies, I've hired literally thousands of people. I was in HR for at least 3 or 4 years. And it's like there's a core group of people that always make every project succeed. And there's a core group of people hidden in the group that are doing everything they can to either like undermine it or steal things or whatever it is that they're doing. It's just
yeah,
human nature. You have to understand how to get the job done and how to work with people to make it happen. And the people who need to be gotten rid of
mhm,
need to be gotten rid of as soon as possible. As soon as you can identify the source, you get
mhm,
rid of it. And
yeah,
Spielberg went on, and I'm sure he insisted from then on, every single person has to have personal loyalty to his storytelling vision, or they're gone.
Mm.
because his storytelling vision is basically what his job is.
Yeah.
So when he did what he did, he made sure after he learned from the problems he had with the production people, the people at the upper end of the Hollywood um, people that were just there for vacation that weren't really doing what they were supposed to be doing, he realized, I can't have this ever again.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be exposed to this level of persecution again. And I'm sure that was in terms of the story of Jaws and the story of making Jaws and the story of Steven Spielberg. Uh, there's a lot of frictive interactions that you can learn from. I always use the phrase because it's true. It's about being eaten alive. If the
Mm.
project is going to eat you alive, you have to do everything you can to avoid that. And you need to know it's a possibility. That can happen at any point in your life.
Mm.
Uh, Businesses get bought out, they get closed, people get laid off, people get fired. Sometimes you're dealing with a manager who's secretly a psychopath. You never know what's going on. So, I mean, life is not a picnic. And at different points, you may not actually physically get eaten alive by an animal or by a fish, but your career may get eaten alive, or the
Mm.
life as you know it may get eaten alive, and then you've got to pick up the pieces and move on. So the movie Jaws, the making of Jaws, the making of all the books and documentaries about Jaws, and all our friendly little group of at least 200,000 people that are like Jaws aficionados, it's like it's all the same story. It's the story of the human race, and it's the story of storytelling and how people interact within that story. And it is also simultaneously about the telling of the story.
There's so much there that we could unpack. I mean, first of all, even though you may not appear in the final credits, on behalf of the Daily Jaws and the hundreds of thousands of followers that we have, thank you for just helping make this movie happen. Because obviously, since talking to you for the last 40 minutes or so, we're really starting to understand not just yours, but Ward's and Kevin's and everyone's contribution to this film in that moment. And I think, again, sort of the art imitating life. I think I get asked the question, why is Jaws my favorite movie? And why do I love it so much? And how has it sort of become this big part of my life? And I think for me, it kind of asks and answers the ultimate question, which is, do you have what it takes when the moment comes? And I think that is absolutely true of the crew of Jaws, from what you've told us. I think it gave us Spielberg because it made him have to step up and do what he needed to do at 26. I mean, obviously you had a very focused, a broad remit, but very focused sort of task in terms of Orca, Shark, set construction, stuff like that. Whereas Spielberg was top of the tree in terms of the organization, and he had the whole vision that he was trying to tie all of these things together. But all of you ended up stepping up, doing what needed to be done in the moment. And like you say, you've carried that into your life. You know, just before we press record, you said that Jaws was a great learning lesson, and it was one of the great learning lessons for Steven Spielberg. I believe it gave us the Spielberg that we've kind of got now. And he always says that, I can't remember which interview it was, and I always forget which one it is, but he said the three toughest movies and the ones that taught him the most were Jaws, Saving Private Ryan, and Ready Player One, because they pushed him so
Yeah.
far out of his comfort zone, not just as a storyteller, but from a technical point of view. And I think that's the kind of stuff. It's like the harder the circumstances, if you can rise to it and face that and overcome it, then you can make absolute miracles absolutely happen. And just on your point about working with psychopathic managers and all that kind of stuff, yes, I've been there as well. Sadly, it happens from time to time. But like you say, life is not a bed of roses, and sometimes you just have to step up to a challenge that you don't see coming. And but ultimately, I mean, Jaws is, for me, it's the perfect movie. It really is. Did you
Well,
have any?
Ross,
Sorry, go on.
go ahead.
I was just going to
Go
ask,
ahead.
did you, even though it was this playground of innovation in a pressure cooker. Did you have any sort of standout favorite memories while working on the movie? Were there any particular things you thought, "God, that was a great day," or "That was a funny story," or anything like that?
I I actually, made some lifelong friends on that movie. Roy Arbias' son, Michael, I think his name is, when I was working at Shark City, he was there and we made shark's teeth together, and I taught him a lot of different things, and we've reconnected on Facebook since then, and,
Oh, amazing.
and I became friends with Ward. Ward married a local island woman, Joyce Welton. They got married. Uh, well, Joyce had a son who wasn't quite 18, and they were out in Hollywood for a while. And because he wasn't 18, they needed to put him into foster care, and I ended up being his foster father for a brief period of time. And the Kevin Pike and I, we're still good friends. I got a call from Kevin in Paris just last week. He's doing all these different movie connection things where he goes and does things. And it's like, he went out there and set up his own studio out to Hollywood afterwards. And he had a struggling career, just like everyone else does. You can never have a clear career in Hollywood, but that's what he wanted to do. And he was the director of special effects on Back to the Future. He actually built the DeLorean time machine. And, he's out there now, and people are making reproductions of those. So Kevin had a good, solid career, more or less, as much as you can have a solid career in in the movie making business. And he knows a lot about pyrotechnics, and he's worked with a lot of different people,
Mm,
including more work for Spielberg and stuff. So, but I made a lot of good friends, and the hard work, it's like when I finished the beach scene and I stood and I looked at that, I felt that I had built a um, a piece of like art that was ready. I felt that this was perfect. It looked really good. Ward was happy with it. I heard that Joe Alves was very happy with it. And after we had it set up, nothing had to be changed, nothing had to be fixed. And I felt the same way, not about Orca 1, but about Orca 2, because I took a great deal of pride in making sure that it was an exact duplicate.
mm.
I painted seagull poop on it, and like, I did it on both boats. And I didn't just
Yeah.
paint it, I made it exactly the same. The gray, the brown, and the white are exactly the same, in exactly the same pattern. So that if somebody was meticulously crazy, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And
Mm,
it's just like, and the work with the billboard, I wanted that seam to disappear, and I didn't get it. I came close, but
mm,
I can see that seam. And there's seams also on the beach scene that I was aware of, that I saw that we couldn't fix, but I knew the camera wouldn't pick them up. But I can
mm.
see it on the movie, but other
Yeah.
people, it goes right past them. They don't see it, because that's the point of what I do, is it's invisible to the eye, and it
Mm,
should be, because the focus is on the action, or on the shark, or the actual actors, and not the background people, and not certainly not the set. So the fact that you can't see anything, you get the general impression that the beach scene is there, and it's like, ooh, that's a beach scene, and that's a band
mm,
gazebo, and that's an arcade and a hot dog stand. Of course it is, because that's what you have in a beach scene. Well, that goes to Joe Al's design and Ward's pushing hard to make sure that it looked perfect, and then the attention to detail at the actual construction moment to make sure that it all works, and
mm.
good communication, and basically just getting the job done.
Yeah. It's incredible. What did you think of the final film when you saw it for the first time?
I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. I couldn't believe that what we had done had ended up as that movie. And I also saw it with Lee Fierro, who was a very good friend of mine. I knew
Mm,
her and her husband for like 10, 13, 15 years. And I'm still good friends with her son, Ethan.
mm,
And Lee Fierro, who had a son uh, about the age of the Kintner boy, she's a famous actor before she came to Martha's Vineyard. She was in the early years of TV. She was a
mm,
SAG card holding member when she took that job, and she wouldn't do the job the way they wanted her to do it. She kept walking away from them. She was not going to swear. She did
mm,
not like dirty language, and she would not swear for them. And she walked away, and they basically rewrote the part for her and did it her way. And
mm.
she was right. And
Yeah.
I saw the movie with Lee, and Lee just thought it was hilarious too. It's like, because we didn't know what the final product was going to be, and it was just so funny to see um, a what had been a series of like jumbled kinds of events, and then seeing it turned into a final finished story. And I mean, that has to bring, I know for people who've never seen it before, it's a shocking movie and people are terrified and they don't want to get in the water anymore and all that stuff. But for people who made it was really a fun thing to see what Steven Spielberg created from
Mm,
Lego pieces that could not be imagined to be in the final shape that he ended up doing with Verna Fields. It's
yeah.
like uh, I thought the movie was fun. I've seen it probably less than 20 times over 50 years, and I've seen it with people that like want me to like we stop and I talk about stuff in the movie, and that's always a fun thing to do. And uh, they're Jaws fans, and they know that I have the stories. I mean, I was there from the beginning to the end, so I know a lot about each one of those, uh, even the little black non-skid things on the side of Orca 1 and Orca 2 that they, at one point, his foot slips on
Mm.
his way going forward. And like I actually put those things on both of those boats. So it's like, uh, and the when the shark comes through the wall, I made that cabin wall. Not only did I make that cabin wall, but I made 6 copies of it, 3 out of balsa wood and 3 out of pine. The same
Mm,
thing with the transom on the back of the boat. It's like it looks like the shark smashes through the transom on the back of the boat, and it's a successful shot.
mm.
That's what you see. That's what the fans see, and that's what they're supposed to see. That's not what I see. I can tell the difference between a piece of balsa wood and a piece of pine floating on the water. Two different buoyancies entirely.
Incidentally, that shot of the of Bruce coming through the cabin window, that's actually Joe Al's favorite shot of the shark in the whole movie. He says the shark looks great, everything breaks as it's meant to. It just for him that's the perfect shot, even better than the bigger boat moment. He said when we spoke to him last
And
year.
they didn't know they would be able to get it. That like the wall could have like remained intact and just caved in, and
Mm,
instead it shattered in a breakaway type version. And basically you can do some tweaking within that, but it's basically nobody knows what's going to happen
mm,
when the shark actually crashes through the wall. That's why we could take that wall out and we could put another wall right in again. We could
yeah,
do it with pine and we could do it with balsa wood, depending on what worked.
yeah.
So it's his favorite shot, but it might never have happened because it might not have been able to happen.
Well, it'd be easier today, wouldn't it, with all sort of CGI and things like that. Which leads me nicely to one of my favorite questions that I always like to ask the cast and crew of the Jaws movies. If Jaws was rebooted, remade, whatever, say in the next few years, how do you think the shark might be done, or how would you like to see the shark being done?
I would like to see a physical, full scale size shark that is an actual working model, because I've seen CGI out of China and a few other things, and CGI doesn't have the realistic fear that comes with being in the water with a shark.
Mm.
And you may not be able to get, you certainly couldn't train a shark to do that, but if you had a full scale model, they could make one now, and it would be terrifying.
Mm.
And CGI is, the action's good, the adrenaline pump is there, the little dopamine charge is there, but it's not real and you're not afraid of it. It's
Yeah.
like when you see Quint sliding down the deck into the mouth of a shark,
Mhm.
that's terrifying. When
Mm.
he's getting eaten alive, that's terrifying. If it's CGI, it's going to be exhilarating, but it's
Mm.
not going to be terrifying. When
No.
you see a man being eaten alive by an actual shark, that's that it doesn't go to let's save Quint. It's like, oh my God, I could be eaten alive. Holy mackerel. This
Mm.
is this is not, I've never seen a human being eaten alive, and most people have not. So
No.
it's like the only way, and they will never redo Jaws. The only way they could really capture that is if they had a shark model that was fully articulated and
Mm.
could do the job. But the thing is, as we all know, that mouth can fit a human being. A great white's mouth is much smaller and goes away in chunks.
Yeah. See, this is the thing for me because we've learned so much about sharks now. Obviously, the shape of Bruce, like for example, my model here, it's a very
Yeah,
exaggerated version of what a great white shark actually looks like. You know, it's got a much squarer head and a bigger mouth for obviously practical purposes and just for visual astonishment. Um, I think yeah, if it was to be remade, relaunched, or whatever, I'd love to see a full-size practical shark just to see the technical innovations because Jaws, you know, it did kickstart a bit of a special effects revolution, particularly when you look at the fact that it's not even just on dry land, it's something that's in the water, and yet it was still used and was just superb effect. You know, it's still cited as one of the scariest movies ever made. And to your point, you know, even not even the close-up stuff with the shark, but even just when they first see the shark come through the water and it's just the fin coming towards the orca and that amazing Joe Williams score kicks in, just the way the water reacts to the prop makes it more real. And I went to see the Meg 2 in the cinema when it came out, I think it was last year. And it is what it is. It's not Jaws. It's not trying to be Jaws. It's not saying it's trying to be Jaws or anything like that, but because it was, I think, predominantly CGI, there was a real lack of fear. And I felt like I was just literally having the film wash over me and I didn't feel engaged. And the only other shark movie that I felt kind of engaged with was The Shallows. I don't know. Have you ever seen The
yes,
Shallows before?
yes. And, and
Uh,
and that was good. And
mm,
if you look at all the shark footage on YouTube, whichever ones you happen to like or you happen to see, you can see that the shark interaction is quick and you barely can see what's going on.
mm,
So it's like that's the part that's scary. The fact that it's not the like the long grasping close up or like a lot of action.
mm,
It's the fact that it's a hit and run. This is how this animal lives. It
mm,
comes in quick. It takes the bite. It's gone. It may or may not come back.
yeah.
That shark behavior, that's what's terrifying to swimmers.
Mm,
Because when you get attacked by a shark, uh, when you see a shark attack on a YouTube video, that shark knows exactly what it's doing. It
mm,
owns that piece of water, and it really doesn't care who you are because you're food.
mm.
And that level of terror uh, is just doesn't get captured by CGI. It just doesn't.
No, I agree. And I think the other thing as well that's interesting with the advent of drone technology in terms of sort of shark encounters, a lot of people are encountering sharks and they don't even know it. Like there's
Yeah,
some fantastic footage of surfers, and literally maybe 15 feet away, there's a great white shark, and it is literally just there, and it's just looking, checking you out, realizing you're not a threat, you're not prey, you're not this. So I'm just going to carry on and do my shark thing somewhere else. You
yeah,
surf, I'll shark. Happy days. And you didn't even realize the shark was there. Obviously, shark encounters that happen, unfortunately, from time to time. But it's in terms of the actual non-negative encounters, in terms of like the negative ones, it's few and far between. But just getting back to the point, just something physically in an environment interacting with a boat an actor or whatever it happens to be is infinitely scarier.
I was going to say, just to highlight what you're saying, what this all, well, everything that happened because of Jaws for 50 years goes back to the Indianapolis and the horror show that occurred during the Indianapolis.
Mm,
And I've read several things on the Indianapolis, and it's much different than any movie you're going to see on the Indianapolis, because that was like uh, 3.5, 4 days of being attacked rapidly and quickly by 3 or 4 different varieties of shark in a feeding frenzy.
mm,
And that animates everything that's happened in the whole Jaws story, going back to Benchley and before Benchley. It's like the story of the Indianapolis animates everything that goes into this, whether it's CGI or whether it's real. It's
mm,
like it's possible that if you were engaged in flying in a plane wreck or on a cruise and a shipwreck or at the beach, it's possible that you could get actually attacked by a live shark that intends to eat you.
mm,
And that is the one of the most important animating things behind the movie,
mm.
is like, are you going to be Hooper? Are you going to be Brody? Or are you going to be Quint?
Who are you
And
going
it's
to
like,
be? That's what it comes back to.
it's like
Exactly.
who do you identify? That's what I always ask people. Who do you identify in this movie? And
Mm.
a lot of people say it's not Brody, it's Hooper. Hooper ran for cover,
I'll tell
and
you. I'll tell you I've got a very quick story about this because I
yeah,
was speaking to Wendy Benchley, and I was speaking to another person, and I because I've been I get asked this question and I've been giving it some thought. And for me, it's kind of been a transitional thing when it comes to relationships with the characters. Because when I first watched it as a kid, I wanted to be Hooper. I wanted to be in the beanie. I wanted the beard. I wanted to be in sharks. I wanted to be around sharks. I wanted to learn all about them. I had aspirations to be a marine biologist, but I'm not a scientific mind, so that career was very quickly abandoned. But I think it was the almost like the childlike fascination and excitement about sharks. You know, all kids can relate to that. So I think when we all kind of watched Jaws when we're younger, we probably lean towards Hooper. And then as you get a little bit older, you start to have some experiences in life. You realize that things aren't, always going to be a bed of roses. It's not all going to be sunshine and puppy dogs and rainbows. And you start to develop, a few scars, a few traumas and stuff. And that's when you start to maybe relate to Quint a little bit more. And then when you maybe come out of that curve a little bit, and especially over the last few years, because I've got two amazing goddaughters. One is 3, the other one's 7. I love them. They're the center of my world. And all of a sudden, I felt a real sense of duty and protection and obligation coming out of me. And therefore, I feel that's more Brody. So I'm kind of in my Brody phase at the moment, but I've gone through a Hooper and a Quint phase, and I've kind of brought aspects of those characters with me. And again, I think that's the key thing with Jaws. And I think a lot of really great movies, not just Spielberg, but really great movies, they always ask the same kind of question in an interesting way. Who are you really? And do you have what it takes when the moment comes? Can you shoot that air tank with that World War II rifle with your last bullet? Can you do it?
yeah,
That's the question it asks, I think.
yeah, and that is storytelling, and that's Steven Spielberg
Mm,
using that message without hitting you over the head with it and leaving it open, so that people leaving the movie uh like can come to their own decision tree. Where are they now? Um I'm a Quint type person because I'm really out there, and I'm a little foolhardy, and I understand risk very well on a bunch
mm.
of different levels. And Quint could have easily killed that shark if he'd managed his risk a little bit better. And um, that's the whole thing about like good storytelling engages the people who the story is being told to, and
Yeah,
that's basically why everyone's involved, in Jaws 50 years later.
yeah. What would you like to see sort of in a 50th anniversary celebration? What would it look like for you?
I'm not sure what they're all doing, and I think they they don't have see if they're planning on doing something on Martha's Vineyard, and I won't like spill the beans because I know a lot of people on Martha's Vineyard, and I know a lot of people involved in like discussing what's happening. And essentially, in order for it to be successful on Martha's Vineyard, I'm gonna I'm gonna just say this right out. It's like, don't make it the making of Jaws. Don't make it a disaster. This is a predictable event. You know there are finite resources on Martha's Vineyard. You know
Mm,
there's uh, a way of doing things on the island, and you know they only take reservations starting a year before you want the reservation. So
mm,
there's going to be a cluster that happens between now and the end of July where Universal is going to decide we want to do something on this weekend or this week. And if it was up to me, I would do a series of different events throughout the course of the summer. So it doesn't turn into a configuration where everybody is unhappy. What are you going to do if it rains on the week that you pick?
mhm,
So it's like I would do 5 or 6 specific things that are focused so that people could go to all of them or they could go to just the one they really want to go to.
mhm,
But I don't have any idea which way the decision making is going to go at this point. But I do know that the community of Martha's Vineyard is a predictable community. And the stress that happened when they made the movie Jaws is going to be reproduced if they are careful. They can prevent that. And
yeah.
that's and I mentioned this to several people. It's like, hey, we all know how things work on the vineyard, and this is not going to be pretty unless somebody takes charge of it immediately and decides this is what's going to happen.
Mm,
So I don't know which way it's going to go at this point because there are a bunch of factors involved. There's going to be a lot of money involved. I mean, even the mass lottery is doing a lottery ticket that, uh, you know, they stand to profit, they stand to gross like $80 million on that one scratch off lottery ticket.
mm,
And they stand to profit somewhere between $7 and $10 million after they paid out all the winnings and everything. So there's going to be big money involved in the Jaws 50th um,
yeah.
celebration, and I hope they don't ruin it. That's why my own little effort is basically to try to give something that a child could afford, like as a birthday present, or that a
Mm.
Jaws collector might enjoy. And that is like beyond that, it's out of my hands. Nobody's really asked me, and I don't expect them to. I'm a well-known character within the Jaws community,
Mm.
and I've never turned down any request from any Jaws person, for whatever it is, and I've had a lot of oddball requests, and that's okay. It's like it's all good. It's like it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and there's a lot of people out there that little things mean a lot to them, and I think it's better to like have the world be a better place and a nicer place and a kinder place than to have it be all business.
No, you know what? That's beautifully put because we're kind of with you on it. Like we hearing things, whispers, but nothing official. We published a story recently about someone who's trying to crowdfund stuff, and Martha's Vineyard Chamber of Commerce weren't particularly impressed with the proposal and all of this kind of stuff. And we're just, but this is part of the reason why we're trying to have these conversations with people who were there, because worst case scenario, nothing happens. So at least there's some kind of digital resource here for people to look back and hear the stories firsthand. And we think it's really important to try and document this movie before the 50th anniversary. And obviously, there are fantastic documentaries already out there, but a lot of information has surfaced since those documentaries were made. And also, I haven't spoken to a few people about the Jaws Fest stuff. So I think there was a Jaws Fest in 2005 and another one in 2012, I think it was. The first one apparently was really good, really positive, great experience. It
Yeah.
delivered. The second one apparently became a bit more all about business. It wasn't particularly well organized and it was a bit of a cash grab. And it's like, let's try and make it more like the first one. So we kind of hope that, ultimately something really good will be done. It doesn't need to be, earth-shatteringly amazing. Just bring in the core people to tell their stories, share their experiences, screen the movie, get some creators out there making interesting stuff, and just share the love of the movie. And like you say, turn it into something really positive, because I get the feeling it's probably going to be the last time this movie is going to be celebrated on this scale, particularly with people getting older. They're not going to maybe want to make the trip in a few years' time. So now is a really, really important moment. Um, so before we sign off, Marty, I have one
Yeah,
final question for you. Roy Scheider, in an interview, he said that Jaws will go on forever. Why do you think Jaws is still being talked about so passionately 50 years later? What is it about this, not just movie, but phenomenon?
you've touched on this slightly, and I've mentioned it a bit um, myself, and I always go back to a good physics metaphor: the the gravity that holds it all together, that intense weight that pulled everybody in or around it, and has done that for 50 years. That's a great metaphor for the movie. And essentially what it comes down to is you we lie to children all the time about reality and what's going to happen in their lives, because we don't have the heart to ruin their childhoods.
Mm,
And we do the same thing to adults, because the world is not going to be what you think it is. And there are going to be situations, uh, personal, traumatic situations, where people get overwhelmed. And the core of Jaws is about what happens if you're in a situation. Are you prepared? Have you been correctly trained to deal with the fact that you might be eaten alive, or that this trauma is going to hit you?
mm,
And the naked revelation of what happens in Jaws is something you cannot avoid. When Quint is going into the mouth of the shark, it's not what he planned. He's a highly competent fisherman. He's killed literally hundreds of sharks. He's going to be eaten alive. And in the back of everyone's mind, that exact same question. It's like we talked about the three characters. We talked about, you know, what's the story about? And essentially, the story's about your life. I hope you're never in a traumatic situation where you are sliding into the mouth of something that you're not interested in having being your endpoint.
mm,
And that that is danced around. It's not personal. And with Jaws, it is personal.
mm,
It's like Quint's just the first. It might be Brody and Hooper next. And the
mm,
same thing is true with real life. It's like we basically don't want to ruin children's lives by having them tell them, about what might, the bad things that could happen. We don't tell it to people in their 20s. We don't tell it to people in their 30s. We certainly don't tell it to people in their 70s. And that's the difference between our stories and the story of Jaws. It's like, this shit is real, pardon the
mm,
language, but this stuff is real. And
mm,
that's uh, the possibility within reality of something happening that you have been unprepared for is actually pretty good,
mm,
because each one of us will hit two or three curbs full speed. And what happens after you hit the curb is up for grabs. The car can flip, it can just keep going, it can spin off the road. A lot of things can happen. And
mm,
um, knowing, seeing for the first time, possibly in the movie Jaws, that life doesn't end the way you think it's going to end. And if you're Martin Brody, you got to pick up a rifle and you got to shoot straight. And
mm.
this could be you. And
Yeah.
that's what I think is the value of the movie and of talking about the movie. is like to bring home this message that we all have to step up to the plate at some point, and really bad things do happen in everyone's life.
Wow. That's one of the best answers I've ever heard to that question. Absolutely fantastic. I think, yeah, we've all got our shark in our life. Maybe we get two or three, and we all have to take
Yeah.
our shot and deal with those. Wow, what a conversation. Marty, thank you so much for taking some time out just to speak to us and share your great stories about being a part of that fantastic crew that helped bring Jaws to life. And also, just on a personal level, thank you for being such a great supporter of the Daily Jaws for such a long time. I can't believe this is the first time we've actually properly spoken, bearing in mind how long we've kind of known each other through the digital waves of Facebook. Um, Guys, I'm going to sign off now because I can't imagine this conversation getting any better. But what I'll do, Marty, I'll leave the final word to you before I sign off. So please, if you've got any last words of wisdom or a message for the fans or just a ta-ta, whatever you'd like to say, now is the time, my friend.
Well, basically, if you are a Jaws fan and there's something that you want to do with your kids, or one of your kids wants to do something, I would encourage you to like look at the other Jaws fans that are fully participating in this celebration coming up. Jaws is an impactful movie. Enjoy your life. Do something. Have fun with it. It's like do something goofy. Get a t-shirt, get a hat. Don't be afraid to talk to people about it. And if you find yourself in a desperate situation, you can fall back on the Jaws community, and somebody will be able to help you one way or another. That's the nature of the Jaws community. Ross mentioned this earlier. This is a good, positive, friendly community of people who love this movie, and just keep spreading that kindness around. It's not really a movie about a shark, is it? It's about the fans.
That's it.
So
Wow.
have fun with it.
Fantastic. Marty Milner, thank you again so much. Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws. I've been speaking with Marty Milner, legendary crew member for the making of Jaws. I'm going to bid you a fond farewell and adieu. And until next time, I will be definitely drinking to your legs.